Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. Jannik Sinner is Wimbledon champion for the first time. He wins his fourth career major title and beats Carlos Alcaraz on Championship Sunday on center court. 4-6, 6-4, 6-4, 6-4. An emphatic and triumphant bounce back after a painful defeat at Roland Garros over a month ago against Alcaraz. Sinner snaps his 5-match losing streak here. And if I may just jump right into the match analysis, and I'll talk big picture on Sinner and Alcaraz towards the end. But if I may just jump right into the match. I think it's been clear for anybody observing these last 5 matches carefully that Jannik Sinner, in order to reverse the result, was never going to have to reinvent the wheel. He just needed some small details to start going his way. Small improvements, small adjustments, and some things that would just make his chances a little bit better on the margins. And here we got better serving, better courage in big moments, and better conditions to do what Jannik Sinner does best, which is to put Carlos Alcaraz under time pressure relentlessly, rush him relentlessly, strip him of all oxygen at any opportunity so that he's not able to do what he does so well, which is come at you with a barrage of finesse and power that is completely undefendable. A combination of variety and firepower that you just don't have any chance to deal with. You got to get on him before he can do that stuff. And boy, was Sinner on him. The conditions being a little bit quicker, they help that style just be a little bit more effective, obviously, because the court isn't slowing down the ball quite as much. He did a lot of that stuff super well in Paris, and he got to triple championship point. So it's worth digging into why this works and why Jannik Sinner can do this, because, again, this is not some sort of genius concept or novel idea. Time is always, no matter what level and what matchup, is always one of the most precious commodities on the tennis court. Every player wants time on the ball. Jannik Sinner is just better than anybody else at taking it away. With the pace that he brings on his average rally ball that he can make consistently, like that's the first thing. On a very basic level, if most players tried to play as fast as Jannik tries to play, they would miss a ton. And even Sinner, I think, presses up against his comfort zone against Alcaraz, goes a little bit bigger than he would normally go. And that's why we saw 13 unforced errors for Sinner in this first set and 2 sloppy +1 balls that he misplayed at 4-5 in the opening set that gave Alcaraz a bit of an opening up to 30-all in that game. For the rest of the match, it stabilized. So Jannik got a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more consistent. But the point is, with how big Sinner's hitting the ball, the fact that there's no consistency deficit for the latter 3 sets is significant. Most players, their backhand isn't big enough to meaningfully rush Alcaraz consistently. But Sinner's is, especially when he takes it down the line, which he did so well in this match. And he took so much initiative taking his backhand hard down the line, which naturally gets across to the opponent a little bit quicker than the cross court and takes advantage of Alcaraz positionally at times as well. And the other thing is most players can't return well enough to get on Alcaraz right away like you need to, because as soon as Carlos has time to operate off his first ball, it's basically too late. He's getting that aggressive first strike in, and you're not going to be able to rush him from there. The amount at which Sinner is able to get the ball hard at Carlos's feet and just force Alcaraz to sort of half volley that +1, pop it up a bit, float it a bit, and now Sinner can take a huge cut on that fourth ball, and now he's starving for oxygen. He's starving for time. The negative effects on Alcaraz were huge here. One, he started to feel insecure from the baseline. He didn't like how little time he had, and for me, this had a lot of effects that were a little bit more subtle. One of the things that we look at is the first serve percentage of Alcaraz being 53%. But the damage was really, really high. Carlos hit 15 aces. There were a lot of service games where his serve looked awesome, where he didn't need to work very hard, where he won a lot of quick points. It didn't look like Alcaraz really wanted that smoke in rallies. And I've never seen him hit his serve so aggressively. But you look at that percentage, and when does aggressive become reckless? I got the impression that Alcaraz was over-hitting his first serve, which is not something I've ever seen out of him. But to me, what was his average speed? Let me take a quick look. Averaging 125 miles per hour on the first serve and going after lines. To me, it looked like a guy who was fishing for aces because he was insecure about, again, you want to do damage with your first serve no matter what. I just thought the aggression levels was almost beyond for Alcaraz, where he couldn't make enough. There was some overplaying on the drop shot off of balls that were coming in with a lot of speed. So they weren't being played on his terms, and they came across as bailouts because the degree of difficulty was exceptionally high. And then when you look at it, other than the end of the first set, when Alcaraz kind of pulled out his drop shot and hadn't used it that often, and then it ended up being very effective, and he used it from offensive positions. Other than that, the drop shot was largely ineffective. You also saw Carlos's variety constricted, which happened in Paris as well. Just a lot more straight line hitting from Alcaraz because he was shock absorbing and reacting, so he couldn't manipulate the ball in all the ways that he wants to. I wouldn't discount also just the part of it where it wasn't fun for Carlos. It looked like he was hating the rallies because of how little time he had, and he never got into doing what he likes to do, which is take initiative and throw the first punch and try to make something happen. It was so much react, and it made him feel, I think it made him enjoy the match less. I really do. We saw negativity from Alcaraz when the match was on serve in the third set. We saw a lot of negativity. We saw kind of the joy leave his body. And I'm thinking, wait, we're on serve third set. He's not losing. Nothing's gone terribly wrong on the scoreboard here. Why does Alcaraz look so miserable? I think it's the way Sinner was playing him. That's what I think. And then the other thing it does, I've already alluded to this, but it just quiets the forehand pace along with the variety. It quiets all that down. Again, Sinner tried to do this in Paris. He just got better conditions to do it here. Darren Cahill comments pre-match. I thought these were very illuminating. Coverage of Wimbledon on Monday Match Analysis is brought to you by Go Sport. Go Sport is a family-owned company that specializes in just tennis bags, so they do it better than the other brands that juggle a million other different products. This is the Axiom 2.0 backpack, which holds 2 rackets in a nice, tidy compartment in the back here, which gives all this other space for the rest of the stuff. There's 8 additional pockets. There's these nice big side pockets. I've got sunscreen in one. I've got my Aix-en-Provence water bottle in the other. And I also have this pocket on the side that holds your stinky shoes and your stinky clothes. It is ventilated specifically for those items, which comes in a lot of handy. It is cheaper than the big bag, and it's also cheaper if you use my code GIL10. Go to gosport.com. That's GAU sport.com. Link will be in the description. Use that code GIL10. And now back to the analysis. Darren Cahill comments pre-match. I thought these were very illuminating. He was asked before the match on ESPN, what did you learn from the loss at RG? What did you take away from that? What are you going to adjust? And I think Cahill at this point knew that both players were already on the court, so he could pretty much speak freely. There weren't really any secrets. Darren said, first, that's a tough question because we thought we did everything right at RG. So goes back to not having to reinvent the wheel. Darren felt we did everything right. And then he reiterated, as long as Jannik brings the power and brings the speed, it's a little tougher to use the variety on the grass. So we're decoding that, right? Keep the pace up to a maximum on the grass, and Alcaraz is going to have a lot of trouble constructing points the way he wants to. Then he said, Jannik needs to be bold and brave in big moments. And the last thing he said is a lot will come down to how they serve. So we're going to get to all that. But let's go to the serving now, because it's a huge theme with our discussion of Alcaraz and Sinner. But I don't think the first serve, I've already mentioned Alcaraz being at a low percentage and what my read on that was. I thought the second serve was a bigger deal. And it also ties into being bold and brave in the big moments. For me, the best thing that Sinner did in this match, beyond the ordinary, the thing that had me most like, wow, Jannik, if he's going to do that, then he deserves to lift this trophy. It was his version of the Alcaraz big cojones, big point gambling. And he did it with the big second serves. In the third set at 3-4, 30-all. Again, we're back to this being, it's an even match. It's on serve. Alcaraz has the scoreboard pressure. 1 point away, and Carlos has a break point to serve for a 2-1 lead. It's a second serve, and Sinner goes 117 out wide. Slider gets the free point. How about in the fourth set? The two biggest points of the fourth set, without a doubt, were the two break points that Sinner faced at 4-3. 15-40, second serve. Sinner hits another slider out wide at 110 miles per hour, but it gets a lot of tail. And it gets away from Alcaraz, just slides out of the strike zone. Carlos is reaching, and he mishits it. Service winner. Add in to close this game, and anybody who experienced watching this match can know, like, this was just, your heart is pumping with the adrenaline. The magnitude of this service game feels enormous. So he's doing that on break point. He's also doing it on game point. Second serve, add in. Now we're on the add side, and we get an 118 mile per hour second serve up the tee. Hard at the forehand. It's funny because I wrote in my notes early in the match. I wrote, I'm wondering if the boldness on the second serve will pay off for Alcaraz. Because I felt in his first few service games, Carlos was going really big on the second serve, and it's something that I saw Carlos do really well against Taylor Fritz. It ended up being the total opposite. Jannik was going bold on the second serve and getting the payoff in some really big moments. Alcaraz ended up losing confidence on his second serve and getting hurt. Alcaraz ended up with an Australian Open situation. The same thing that he suffered with against Novak Djokovic in the quarterfinals in Australia on a quicker, lower bouncing surface. He really struggled in the second serve dynamics. There were a lot of double faults that ended up popping up after the opening set. I think he hit 3 in the second set. Let me fact check that. Fact check true. He hit 3 in the second set, and he started hitting like standard kick serves into Sinner's backhand. And when you're not on clay and you're facing the wrong kind of opponent, aka Djokovic, Sinner, probably the two guys with the best aggressive backhand returns off second serves in the world, although there are some other good ones out there. Off clay against the wrong opponent, it's trouble. If you look at the breakpoint conversion in the fourth set at 30-40, it's a kicker out wide to Sinner's backhand. It is your stock standard kick second serve, a little over 100 miles per hour. And it's not good enough. Sinner blitzes it, backhand down the line, return winner. There was a double fault in that game as well. So that's 2 second serve points where you've lost the point without hitting a ground stroke. And that's the game that Alcaraz was broken fatally in the fourth set. He also hit a slice serve out wide on the deuce side in this game that didn't go wide enough, and Sinner rifled a forehand down the line return. I think Alcaraz got a racket on it, but it won Sinner the point outright. What about in the third set at 4-all, 30-all? Kick serve up the tee, 102 miles per hour. Just a kick serve to Jannik's backhand. It got destroyed. Inside in, Alcaraz desperately scrambling off the first ball. The next second serve on the break point, he did it a little bit better. He hit a harder serve into Sinner's body, but Jannik fought it off really well with an inside-out forehand. And again, Alcaraz was on the move, kind of defending on his +1. But really, it was the kicker to the backhand that Alcaraz had to resort to that was just not good enough. Meanwhile, Sinner is hitting the hard slice serve into the body or the hard slice serve into Alcaraz's forehand, especially on the deuce, that kind of gets away from him. Go back to the principles of damage. What are the ways in which an opponent is damaged? Width. And that's not only adding width on a wide serve or a tee serve that tails away, that's also taking away width and going right at the chest for the body serve. So Sinner was disrupting Alcaraz with width. He was disrupting Alcaraz with pace or speed, and he was disrupting Alcaraz with height because the slice serve doesn't bounce as high. It doesn't get into the comfortable contact zone that a kick serve on grass often will. I thought Sinner's second serve just was way better than Alcaraz's. And the points won ended up being 61% for Jannik, 51% for Carlos. Now, statistically, average speed was actually in the same vicinity. Sinner was at 108. Alcaraz was at 105. I wish that I got a breakdown per set because I am wondering if that 105 for Alcaraz was a little bit juiced up by how big he was hitting it in the first set. Again, I think he lost confidence and it went down. But even so, Sinner was a more consistent speed. And obviously, without the double faults as well. Sinner double faulted twice. Alcaraz double faulted 7 times. So it was a consistent speed and it was a consistent output. With Alcaraz, it was very up and down. Right? He had some huge ones, but then there were some slower kickers that were ineffective, and there were 7 double faults. The other kind of improvements, if we can also just hit on the first serve for Jannik, he hit that number that I've been talking about, hammering it for what feels like about a year now, which is Sinner's first serve percentage. His average is 62%. He hit that number in this Wimbledon final. And average, you'd like it sometimes to be above average, but average was fine on a great second serve day. Average for his first serve was fine. He also got really hot in the third set. And there were more bailout moments. Like, you talk about the big second serves at 4-3 in the fourth set. But how about the second set? Sinner faced one break point in the second set. It was at 2-1. What happened? 134 out wide. Decent spot. Got the service winner. Alcaraz put up stats on his serve, right? He hit a lot more aces. I think he hit the match's first 8 or 9 aces. In total, he hit 15. Sinner hit 8. As I mentioned, there were points in time where Alcaraz's serve looked amazing, but then there were games where his serve got dominated. Third set, 4-all. If you go back and watch that game and you focus on Alcaraz's +1s, he's defending desperately on 3 of them. One of them he starts at neutral. The other 3 he's defending desperately. His serve gets dominated there. His serve got dominated in that fourth set break at 1-all. And there was a double fault in there, as I mentioned. So, and I kind of already talked about that game. You had the big forehand return down the line by Sinner. So that's what didn't happen to Jannik. The serve was consistent for Sinner and it wasn't for Alcaraz. And this serving advantage is one that Sinner just had to have. And it was always going to be more rewarding if he had it in these kinds of conditions as well. The fearlessness. There was the ballsy second serves. There was also Sinner having a bit of let's use a term that the kids like to use these days. He kind of had his I'm him moment serving out the second set. These moments that have loomed large in favor of Alcaraz. 5-4 in the second. At love all, a total steal, highway robbery from Sinner where Alcaraz hits this big backhand down the line and has an absolute sitter and sort of makes a late decision to come forward and volley it out of the air. It's a drop volley that wasn't delicate enough. And what happened here, it's almost like he just underestimated Sinner's speed. Got a bit casual and underestimated the speed because Sinner got there, covered a ton of ground, swooped in for the backhand pass. At 15-all, Alcaraz backs up on the second serve. Sinner hits a great slider out wide and a backhand cross court into the open court to force the error. That's not really part of the I'm him collection, but I wanted to point it out because it is part of what we're talking about with Jannik hitting very, very effective second serves. 30-15, though, now we're back to I'm him. Godly running forehand down the line by Jannik. Unbelievable. Just one of the crossover step, kind of closed stance forehands where he just melts it down the line. It's an absolute beauty. One of the best shots of the match. 40-15. Sinner's on the run. He's going to his backhand. He's hitting a sliding, open stance, two-handed backhand. Alcaraz is then taking him to the other coast. And now Sinner's running to his forehand, although he did, Alcaraz couldn't get much on the shot because of how well he hit that backhand on the line. But Jannik now ranges to his right. It's another step over running forehand. This time he goes cross court short angle for a winner. Alcaraz on the run might do a better job of getting back into points, but Sinner is better at hitting that instant death counterattack. He's more dangerous with that instant death counterattack, and that's what we saw here. And this was big time from Sinner in a big time moment. There's also just how well he played the 5-4 game to close out the match in the fourth set. A lot of really good stuff from Jannik in this game. At love all, there was a lot of really good clean ball striking with great depth until Alcaraz sort of faltered. Great wide serve and a short ball backhand down the line that was nicely finished on the second point. The 30 love point is my favorite because he takes like a little half volley forehand down the line, pickup, and comes forward on a ball that I just think a younger version of Sinner would have stayed back on, and we'll talk more about this in a moment. And he finishes with 2 volleys and then a service winner at 40-15 to close out the match. But just the nerves there must have been so intense. I think you could feel them through the television screen even. And Sinner handled them really well. So just fearlessness, not getting passive in big moments. The biggest Sinner adjustment, though, because so far I've talked about things that he really didn't adjust. He just either did better or had, for whatever reason, a better opportunity to make whatever improvement it was. But the one thing that I do think he adjusted is the forward pressure behind the power, especially on the +1. You're going to get an advantage from your serve. And then the question for Sinner is, how do you stop the point from getting turned around against a Carlos Alcaraz who does it better than anybody? Because at Roland Garros, this was one of the points where I thought Sinner needed to be better. When you have the short ball on your forehand, points got to be yours. How do you get more points? How do you terminate more points from that position? And Sinner had to figure that out. And I didn't know if it was going to be playing closer to the lines, more precise on the forehands. I didn't know if it was going to be drop shotting more. I didn't know if it was going to be coming forward more. It was mostly coming forward more. There was way more serve plus approach from Sinner so that he could take that advantage from his serve, hit one shot, and make sure that Alcaraz's defense was neutralized and that the point was ending there. And it was a really good job from Jannik actually sticking with his guns here, because he got passed a lot in the first set and some change before it felt like the approach shot quality lifted and he stopped getting passed for whatever reason. How about this? Sinner was forward 40 times in this match. Alcaraz was forward 23 times in this match. Both players were around 75% conversion. If there's one thing that I did not foresee, if there's one thing that I was dead wrong about in previewing this match, because I just didn't see it coming, it's that Sinner was up at the net more often than Alcaraz. And a lot of this was opportunity, not so much just desire to be forward, because I think Alcaraz also has that equal desire to be forward. But if Sinner was out returning him, which I believe he was, if Sinner was out serving him, which I believe he was, if Sinner from the baseline was able to produce more short balls, which I believe he was, you just have more chances to turn attacks into approach shots versus Alcaraz, who didn't have as many of those chances. One example is if you look at Tennis Insights in attack data, Sinner was at 33%, which is super high, and Alcaraz was at 20%, which is below average, below tour average for in attack percentage. But you also have to tip your hat to Sinner's skill development in this area, because this is another example of something that Jannik it doesn't come very naturally to Jannik. He's worked very hard on it, and it's gotten to the point where against Alcaraz, who's not easy to net approach off of, he's in 40 times in 4 sets in a Wimbledon final, and he does it successfully. Jannik would not have had that in his bag at this time last year even, I don't think. Certainly not 2 years ago. Let's talk Alcaraz regrets. What could Carlos have done better? Nothing huge here. Nothing massive, but there was a lot. So a lot of little things in my view. First of all, start of the second set. Double fault, +1 forehand on forced error. Now it's love 30. Just doesn't play a good game. Doesn't force Jannik Sinner to come up with a great return game at the start of the second. And that's a tone-setting moment in a match. You've just won the first set, and what better way to allow your opponent to feel comfortable and confident after dropping a set than to spot them a break right away, but especially spot them a love 30 right away without having to do much of anything. You give them a love 30. That's a tough little moment there for Alcaraz. I didn't think that this was the best attitude match for Carlos, and I've already referred to him looking a bit joyless pretty quickly in this match, getting negative even on serve in the third set before things were really so bad that would necessarily warrant getting negative. But another thing is I hated the way Alcaraz played his 40 love points. I thought that there were so many 40 love points that were played at 70% where he would hit his serve and he wouldn't take that recovery step backwards. And then he would hit he wouldn't move his feet and he'd volley from the baseline or half volley from the baseline. And the setup just wasn't there, or it just looked like the commitment to win 40 love points. Did it cost him? Did he get broken from up 40 love? No, it didn't. But when we go back to tone setting and confidence building and just imposing your presence, I felt a lot of these service games ended up getting complicated on Alcaraz, and then you burn more emotional energy and you feel like you're struggling a little bit more. And there were games that went to deuce. There were games that went to 40-30. And as a whole, I think one thing that would be fully in Alcaraz's control, just a needless mistake that he made, was just how many of these 40 love points he played. Not lazily, carelessly. Yeah, that's the word. There were some forehands in the fourth set that Alcaraz would like to have back. There was one which was a forehand inside out where Carlos actually had time to attack it at love 15 on Sinner's serve, and he dumped it in the net. And for me, that probably should have ended up being a love 30 for Jannik. Instead, it was a 15-all, and he held. There was another one at break point at 30-40 in that 4-3 game, and Sinner hit a quality forehand trade cross court, but Alcaraz missed his forehand cross court long. And this was an unforced error on an enormous point on a rally ball forehand. It's funny, your rally ball forehand against Sinner is a lot more difficult than your rally ball forehand against basically anybody else because of how hard Sinner hits his rally balls. But nonetheless, it's a bad forehand miss in that spot. Statistically, tough forehand day for Alcaraz. 7 winners to 19 unforced errors. Another point, the serve and volley was so effective in the fourth set that you wonder if it took too long for Carlos to start using that regularly. Now, I would push back on that a little bit. I know it's my own analysis, but allow me to push back on my own analysis sometimes. Carlos was not broken all that often in this match. He was broken 4 times in 4 sets, and it's grass, and if you're going to win, you've got to hold your serve a lot. So 4 breaks in 4 sets, it's not great, but it's also not terrible. And it's difficult to really thrust into question Carlos's serve strategy in any large way because he wasn't broken that often. But the serve and volley was really effective in the fourth set, and that made you think. Last thing, there should probably be more slicing in neutral. It's one of the best ways to force Jannik to take his foot off the accelerator, to keep that ball low, to make him hit up and bring it up and down. If you want relief from Sinner's ball speed, you've got to slice. And maybe Alcaraz just feels like the ball's coming in too hard to slice and that he wasn't going to be able to keep his backhand slice or even his forehand chip. He wasn't going to be able to keep it low because there was just too much heat coming in, and it's more comfortable to absorb the pace with the drive. That might have been the reason. But at the end of the day, Alcaraz is a talented fellow, to say the least, and I think he could have figured out how to slice a little bit more, even though he was under some time pressure. All right. I want to talk about some bigger picture stuff now. How about the Sinner unflappability? It's easy to lose some of the talking points coming in. You just kind of lose track of them once we're here and Sinner's lifting the trophy, and you forget some of the context coming into this tournament, which is the enormous question marks, which I guess only grew louder after the Bublik loss in Halle, which, as you guys know, I was not really concerned with at all. But just about the emotional toll of the loss at Roland Garros and if that would have a lingering effect. And my response to that at the time was, I've never seen Jannik affected mentally by anything. Not for a long period of time. And I've seen him become world number one. I've seen him win his first major. And handling success, especially in the immediate aftermath, is often just as hard as handling failure. So certainly I saw him handle success, new levels of success, new levels of expectation, new levels of target on his back, and not miss a beat, continue the same winning rate that he did fall of 2023, or after winning his first major, start of 2024, right? I saw him handle success. I've seen him handle distraction, not only the various points in which he had to deal with the anti-doping incident, whether that be the US Open, when the news initially broke, or coming back in Rome, where the story was him coming back from that long break, but also firing his agent, firing his physical team before Roland Garros. Some of these changes, the turmoil around him, he just seems immune to it. The one thing we hadn't really seen was, how do you handle an absolutely excruciating loss in a major final? And now he's answered that as well. The point is, the only impression I've ever gotten about Jannik Sinner mentally, with zero exceptions, is that he is basically a robot when it comes to his ability to turn the page, block everything out, all the outside noise, whatever the context is, and go to work. That's all he seems to do, is go to work. And that continues. What about the rivalry? Where does this leave us? Sincaraz is now 8-5. Alcaraz 8 wins, Sinner 5 wins. But I do think there's one thing worth potentially reevaluating. Not to say that one result, one direction or the other should completely change our view about anything, because it shouldn't. But it is at least worth questioning the idea that from a condition standpoint, this comes down to Sinner being the hardcourt guy and Alcaraz being the natural surfaces guy. Because now you can make a pretty compelling argument that it's actually not that it's a speed thing. Your argument against the conventional wisdom that, in the words of Agassi, Alcaraz on slippery, Sinner on hard, is that Sinner is now 2-0 against Alcaraz at Wimbledon, and that Alcaraz has beaten Sinner on a lot of slow hard courts, Indian Wells and Beijing, to name a couple. And by the way, the US Open in a best-of-5 match back in 2023. So that's your argument against that rule of thumb, that kind of guidance. But if you look at it the other way, and you look at it as a speed thing, well, most of their meetings have been on below average speed conditions, vast majority. But the times we've gotten to see it in quicker conditions, Miami wins Sinner. The 2 Wimbledons wins for Sinner. The only, Paris-Bercy, now it's fast, but I think back when they played their match in Paris-Bercy, I think it was still playing really, really slow. So I wouldn't even include that. You could almost make an argument that now Sinner is essentially 3-0 when they play in quick conditions. Alcaraz wins. Bercy 2021. Again, I really don't think it was fast back in 21. Now it's fast, but they changed it. US Open, well, that's fast, actually. That's on the quicker end. So that's a fast hard court win for Alcaraz in the 2022 US Open. I think you have to say that. Indian Wells in 23 Indian Wells in 24, Roland Garros, Beijing, Rome, Roland Garros. We've talked about that stretch and how all of those are on below average. So just saying, oftentimes in these great rivalries where two players are very, very close in level, there are some conditions, trends that tend to dictate things. And maybe because there is some logic to Alcaraz having specific advantages on clay and grass, athletically and movement-wise, that is mitigated on hard court, and certainly the results overall in terms of the title haul for Sinner as a whole are right now hard court skewed. So there are arguments both ways, but I'm just saying, challenge that a little bit. Is this really about natural versus hard, or is it about speed? That is certainly a question worth asking as we move forward. And speaking of questions worth asking, I am going to do this on a slightly different schedule in terms of the post-major programming. I am probably going to post the mailbag before I talk to Steve Flink, because Steve's got to travel from the UK back to the States, so I might give him an extra day, and we'll knock out this mailbag pretty quickly. So by the time this is posted, I will already have a post up in the YouTube post tab. So check out that post, leave a mailbag comment, and look forward to continued coverage as we continue to digest this historic Wimbledon title for Jannik Sinner. Congrats to Jannik and his fans. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time.